Hi YouTube, welcome back to the BladesIIB shop. I'm excited today. I've got a new piece of equipment coming into the shop and excited to go through an unboxing and setting that up. So I ordered a new surface grinder from Grizzly. It's the Gulf 5963. It's a 6x12 surface grinder. Pretty much I think the last piece of major equipment I need in the shop to help get these knives built. So that should be showing up here on the truck in the next few hours. And I also ordered a magnetic chuck to go with that, a couple extra grinding wheels. So we're going to be unboxing all that equipment, setting up that surface grinder, getting that plugged in and put into operation. For those of you subscribed to the channel, I sure appreciate you joining me in the shop and watching these videos. If you're new to the channel, want to see more videos on machining, welding, knife making, pretty much everything else going on here in the BladesIIB shop, great time to hit that subscribe button. Let me go ahead, turn the camera around, and I'm going to show you the space that I cleared out for the surface grinder to fit in. And then we're going to go ahead and unbox this magnetic chuck, take a look at some of the spare grinding wheels right now, while we're waiting on this piece of equipment to show up on the truck.
It's a good thing this is really the last piece of equipment that I need because I'm running out of space in my shop. But I was able to clear out the corner. I used to have my acetylene tanks in here and I had the kiln pushed over a little bit, had the welder on the other side of it. So I shifted those around a little bit and I cleared out this corner. The compressor is still going to fit in there when the grinder is not in operation, and it's on wheels. It's easy to move. So when I need to use the surface grinder, I'm going to have to roll that out of the way. But that's just kind of how my shop is configured. With the limited space, sometimes I have to move a few things around in order to operate a piece of machinery. But that's what I'm looking at. So we're going to get that put in here, and the grinder comes wired for 110, but I've got a nice 220 outlet right here that I plug my kiln into. So I plan to rewire it for 220 and get it plugged into that outlet right there. And it'll share the same outlet as the kiln. So that's our space. Let's go ahead and take a look at the magnetic chuck and the grinding wheels that have shown up already and see what we've got.
Well, here's what we've got so far. So here's my new plug. So again, I've got a 620 outlet on the wall, so I just picked up a new 620p plug here. We'll get that wired on the end of the cord. It does come with a cord on it, and then we'll follow the instructions to rewire the motor for 220. So we'll get that taken care of. I ordered a couple of extra wheels with it. It comes with a 60 grit wheel installed on it. I went ahead and ordered a couple of 46 grit wheels as well. Wanted to have those, or yeah, I ordered two 46 grit and then a spare 60 grit. I figured while I'm paying the shipping, I may as well have them. I'm sure they'll last quite a while, but we'll have those to put in the cabinet as some spares. And then here is the Southbend magnetic chuck. I went with the low profile magnetic chuck. It's the SB 1296. It's a 6x12 magnetic chuck. Looks pretty nice. There are definitely some cheaper options out there if you want to spend a little bit less money, but this is the one that I went ahead and purchased. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we got in the box here. I'm trying to open this in front of camera here. Shouldn't be this difficult. It comes packaged up pretty nice. A box inside of a box. Alright, now we're stapled onto some wood, so that's going to slow us down a little. And there we go. Alright, I'm going to clear out some of these staples here, make sure I don't cut myself. And there it is. All right, we've got our on and off key. Got some toe clamps for mounting. And that is a pretty thin, low profile unit that we've got there. Looks good. Alright, nicely bagged up and oiled up. We'll do a little cleanup on that. Well, there it is. Alright, so it comes with the toe clamps. I don't see any T-nuts or bolts in the box, so maybe those are going to come with the surface grinder.
or maybe we're gonna have to come up with some of those on our own. Yeah, pretty notable feel where it's all the way on, all the way off. There we go. That's sticking. Yep, I can slide it a little bit. Can't really slide it that way. And there's definitely no picking it up. And that's only hitting magnet on just 2 little spots right there. I think that looks good. So we'll get that mounted on our surface grinder when it gets here. We'll get this all ground in flat. That'll be sort of our first project, I think. Get this totally set up with the machine. Go from there. All right, well, that's it for right now. We'll wait a little bit for that machine to get here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that Grizzly 6x12 and why I ended up going with that surface grinder instead of some of the other options that are out there. Stay tuned. All right, so I did a little quick reading. Comes with nice instructions here on how to set this up, and definitely going to take a little bit of time once we get the surface grinder set up. So first we're going to want to dust and grind the actual surface grinder deck, and then we're going to flip this over. We're going to grind the bottom side of this chuck, and then we're going to flip it back over, and ultimately, if we need to, we'll grind the top side here a little bit, but we'll check if it's straight and flat first. So a few different steps to go through and do that, but first I thought, again, while we're waiting, I'm just going to do a quick clean on this. I typically use kerosene to get rid of the packing oil and grease that comes on equipment, so it's a pretty mild solvent, doesn't usually hurt the paint that comes on any of this equipment. And it works pretty well for cleaning this stuff off. So this didn't come with a very thick coat of oil, so not going to take much at all to clean this. I'm assuming the machine's going to come with a little bit more work to clean up off of that. And as for little imperfections, I see one little teeny nick right there. We'll probably grab a hone stone and we'll take care of that before we set this down. But I'll wait until the machine's here before we do any of that. All right, we're ready for a grinder.
All right, well, it's been a week, but the truck made it. Holiday delays and all of that. Now it's a little dark, but I think we're gonna have something here. Just get her unloaded. Somewhere in there should be a couple of boxes. Got to do a little shuffling around.
Yeah, little musical chairs.
The other one's gonna be heavy. You might get away with sliding that one, but yeah, if that's just the stand, the base, that one's easy. The other one's gonna weigh 450 pounds. Yeah, the other one's gonna weigh a little more than that. It's got to be bigger than that. It's got to be bigger than that, so it can't be that. Way back there?
Well, nope. Looks like they didn't. It's only one piece on here that they sent.
Well, after waiting an extra week for delivery, looks like we got half of it today. So we just got the base, no actual surface grinder to put on it. So the truck driver's out there busy trying to figure out where the other half of the delivery is. And I guess we'll be unboxing and unpacking tomorrow, which is good. Sun will be up, lights will be on. Make for better video anyway. Stay tuned. All right, well, we got one box delivered. Got a trace for the missing box. Looks like it's going to be several days before we hear back on that one. So let's go ahead and get this opened up, see what the stand looks like, get that set in position, and then we'll wait around a few more days for the other piece to get here. Got some gloves on, some safety glasses, and this stuff's not under too much pressure. Nothing crazy there. Nicely packaged in there. All right, the shelf's just loose in there, but seems to have traveled well enough. And we've got a bag of hardware in the hole here. Interesting, I don't see the leveling feet. Yeah, I'm missing those somewhere here. Well, that's it. Not much to that. I'd say it traveled well. Nice that it's not a bolt together. It's already all welded together, one piece. Nice looking base. Well, that is where it should sit. I'm not going to cut my floor until I get the unit here for sure, and I make sure exactly how much room I need off the wall. In the picture, it says they want it 30 inches off of the wall for this cabinet minimum. I'm not sure why that is. I'm going to have it up against the wall. It's the only place I have room for it. So it looks like it's going to fit in there as it's supposed to. Hopefully the rest of it gets here pretty quick. So I should have plenty of room to stand here and operate this once it gets here. Have enough room to get around the wall. Like I say, roll this out of the way, and good little operating space. I think it's going to work out as planned. Stay tuned for the next piece to arrive. Well, welcome back to this video. It's been a couple weeks since we left off after getting the stand, and good news, box number 2 has been delivered. I don't have the video of getting it off the truck because I never scheduled an appointment and I wasn't here. I didn't sign for it. Came home from work and they have dropped it outside my garage door, blocking a couple of cars in there. So we're going to go ahead and get it out of the box, see what it looks like, and at least get it moved into the shop for this evening. Let's at least get this opened up so I can get it on the engine hoist and get it out of the driveway. We'll see what it looks like inside. Outside of the box looks pretty good. It's missing, looks like one leg off of the pallet. So hopefully it hasn't been dropped or anything like that. We'll find out here in a moment. Let's take a look inside. Well, there it is. All right, looks pretty safe and sound in there. Got our lifting hook, easy to access over here. Be able to get the engine hoist on this and move it around pretty easily. Looks good. I don't really see, there we go, there's the toolbox down under there. So that's where I should have the handles and the mounting bolts and all that. So let me get the rest of the walls of this crate off of here. We'll take a better look at it and get it moved over.
Well, the rest of the pallet came apart easy enough. Got inside there and got a chance to peel that plastic back. Get a much better look at the machine underneath. Again, everything looked in good shape. Secured properly down to the pallet. Not finding any issues with it so far.
All right, we've got our leveling pads. Mounting bolts, everything else in here. Let me go move this inside.
Well, I got the toolbox moved inside, and you can see it's starting to get a little bit dark on me as the video gets a little bit grainier right here. But got that unbolted off the pallet with no problem. Just some long bolts in there. They were a little bit stuck in the pallet, and I couldn't get them to push all the way out the bottom, mostly just because that front piece had broken off there with the wood. But got them unbolted, got those pushed through, and then worked on getting that engine hoist over there. I did leave the table in place to start with, but you'll notice when I do finally get to lifting it up that it's not balanced quite as nicely as I would have liked. And just wiggling it around, you just want to reach in there and lift a little bit, and gravity is all that holds that table in place. And a couple times I felt like I was going to lift up on the table, so eventually I just go ahead and get that taken off. Makes it a little bit easier to move around. And I probably could have taken a saw and cut away the pallet some to get the engine hoist right in place the first time. But you'll see when I roll it up there, it's a little bit awkward not being able to push the bolts all the way out the bottom. End up just kind of twisting it, wiggling it around. The whole machine only weighs 400 pounds, I think. So it's not as heavy as you'd think, and just sliding it around on that piece of wood, not too hard, just to kind of move it around a little bit on there. So Here's where I'll start to wiggle it, adjust it to get it turned around enough that I can get the engine hoist in there onto that lifting hook. Finally get the lights turned on out there as it keeps getting a little bit darker and darker. And I still have the different lifting chains and clevises left over from moving my Tormach 1100 MX into place. But you can see where it's just not balanced very well. And I'm grabbing on that table to spin it around. So here's where I finally just go ahead and decide taking that table off is going to be a lot easier. Doesn't make it balance any better. Doesn't really make it balance any worse. So it was fine. All right, I get that moved over to the door, and my plan was just to push it up to the door, get it far enough in, I can set it on my little moving dolly. And again, it's unbalanced enough. It's a little bit hard to set it down and do that. So you can see that truck pulled in, my helper pulled in just in time to be able to come over and give me a hand with running the engine hoist and doing that so I could set it down a little bit better onto there. And there we go. A couple tries. We got that set in place. Got to roll that into its final resting place for the evening.
Well, mission accomplished for the evening. It is inside. It is off the driveway, so out of harm's way for the evening. Get the vehicles back in and out of the garage again, and we will work on getting that mounted up on the stand tomorrow. Work on getting it all put into place. So it looks nice so far, though. Looks just like the pictures. I think it's going to work. All right, let's take a quick look at the rest of the accessories we got here. So here's our leveling feet. So if we combine those with pieces that we got before, a little tight, but those are going to screw on there. We'll screw those into the base of our stand, so we'll get this all put together. Got our 3 lever arms. I'm guessing this is for balancing our wheels. Got a few tools here. Our spanner wrench to get wheels off, I'm guessing. All right, our diamond dresser set up, so we should be good with that. And our 4 bolts to get this bolted down onto the base. Washers top and bottom, be able to lock the nuts on the bottom of that. So we'll get that set on there. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing on its base put into place. I took some quick measurements. I'm going to flip this over. We'll get the feet put on there. And then I know that in order to give a little bit of clearance off of the motor, I need 5 inches to the center of this hole to the wall. And to make sure I have full table travel, I need 20 inches to the center of this hole to the wall over there. So we'll make sure that we get it set as close as possible in place. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put those big wide feet. I'm going to set these right on top of that rubber. I think that'll give it a nice little bit of vibration cushion instead of putting these on the concrete and instead of cutting holes in the rubber. I'm just going to let these sit right on top of this thick rubber floor and level it up from there. I can always come back and tweak it with the level as needed after. That's the plan. Let's go ahead and get this put together. All right, just a washer is enough to space that, keep that from coming through the bottom. Okay, we are ready to set that in place.
Right about here is when I realize I'm going to have to move that roller toolbox in order to be able to line this up well enough on the stand. So I get busy and get working on getting that out of the way.
Well, thankfully, most everything in my shop is movable on wheels. Have this other bench over here, got this out of the way so I can get the engine hoist where we need to. And I'm going to leave the table on this, extend it all the way to the far end. I'm going to see if that helps balance this a little better than when we were lifting it to bring it in here. And if not, I'll pull the table back off and we'll move it on here without. Let's see how this does. Well, I don't think that's balancing us any better, so we're just going to go ahead and take the table back off, make sure we don't knock it off.
All right, well, the easy part's done. It is sitting in place. I'm gonna go ahead and get it bolted on here, and then we'll set the table back on, and we'll see how we're doing for level. Get it leveled up. We'll get this motor rewired for 240, get it plugged in, make sure that we check our wheel, and just go through and start setting this thing up, and we're one step forward. All right, we got this bolted down solid. There's this counterweight bolt back here that I just undid. This really isn't too dirty. I'm just gonna take a little bit of kerosene, just give it a wipe, make sure that it's clean, no grit on there, and then I'll put some fresh whey oil, clean the bottom of the bed as well, and we'll get this put on there. All right, so it tells you the Grizzly whey oil that they want you to use over there. I've got some of this mobile Vectra oil that I use on the lathe. That's what I'm going to use. It's a little bit tough to get to. I've got one of these flexi funnels. Was able to get in there to fill it. It's really, really slow wanting to fill, and it seems to be full, but I'm not seeing any oil yet in the sight glass, so I may have to go back and fill that a little bit. I've definitely got oil coming through. It's coming out over here. Starting to see some oil drip down. So I think it's good. I've oiled up the table, oiled up the ways a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and set the table on there, and we'll start flipping levers around and screw the handles in. I think that's what it looks like. All right, let's get my level on there. Let's see how we're looking for level real quick. And then we'll go ahead and get it wired for 220. All right, so to rewire for 220, we should just go in there. We should find two jumpers under there. We're gonna take both of those out, and we're just gonna put one jumper across the middle. So let's go ahead and get our cover plate off and see what that looks like in there and get that rewired.
All right, so this shows exactly how it came wired from the factory for 115 volt. The jumpers are all in place just like the wiring diagram, but if you notice on here, the capacitor wires are off on the end, so they're in a different location, and the K1 and K2 switch wires are in a different location than they had those in the original diagram. It's just due to that jumper being there. I'll explain that in more detail, but we're gonna jump ahead to, I've got the switch wires all taken off of here, and we'll talk about getting this wired up correctly for 230 volt.
So we're in 115 mode. We've got a jumper over here. We've got a jumper across the bottom, jumper across the top, and we've
got our capacitor wires going across here.
So this one came wired from the factory correctly. We're gonna put our K1 and our K2 wires are gonna go across the two ends here. You can see where the wires go for the switching. So we're gonna put those in place, but we're also gonna move and set up our jumper. So we're gonna remove this jumper and this one, and we're gonna put a jumper across here to get this wired for 230. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then I'll talk about where I'm gonna put K1 and K2 before I screw those in place.
Moving the jumpers really is pretty straightforward. You just take off the two in the 115 mode, put one across the middle, and you're all set up for 230 volt. The only other tricky part is make sure the rest of the wires are in the right place.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and make sure we get this wired up with K2 over here on Z1 and K1 on U1, which is gonna be Z1 back here. So K2 is gonna go back over here, and K1 is gonna go over on this end. That will get us what we need to, and we'll be wired for 230 volts. Let's get them plugged in. Be just about ready to turn this on.
Now, if your motor was already on there and set up in 115 mode and you were just doing the switch over to 230 volt, these three wires, K1, K2, and the ground would already be in place. And as you figured out by now, I had a motor issue, wired it wrong the first time and smoked it, so that's why I'm having to put these wires in place. But this is also getting them in the right location, and that was the issue. You can check it out on my other video.
All right, that should be it. We've got K2 in place, K1 in place. I've got the ground wire around here on the back. There's a little rubber gasket. I made sure it was underneath that, has good contact with the housing. We've got our jumper in place for 230 volt, going across the right direction. It's my third time doing this. Feeling pretty good that I have got this wired up right this time around. Let's go ahead and get our cover back in place. All right, now I just need to cut the end of this plug off, wire in my new one here to fit into my 220 plug. So we'll knock that out. Now let's see, I'll save a little bit. Never know when I might need a plug sometime.
I just sped it up through this part. I didn't show the detail. Just have to strip the ends of those 3 wires, and it's pretty clear once you get inside that plug which one is the ground. And since you're going for 220, it's a hot on either side of that. So get those 3 wires plugged into there. This was a really nice plug, good solid clamp on the back to hold that wire and make sure you had good stress relief.
Well, we've got it wired up. I could go through here and take the whole wheel off. They talk about doing a ring test, but they also say to go ahead and run it up and test your machine out at this point. So we're just going to stand back. We'll let that wheel run. If anything happens to it, it should happen, right off the bat. If anything happened to the wheel or damaged it in progress or in travel, but there's nothing wrong with the guard. So let's go ahead and see how it sounds and get this fired up. Make sure that it is stopped. Level on it is not too bad. Very smooth. Barely feel any vibration anywhere in there. So I think we'll get our chuck on there. We'll dress the wheel really quick, and then we'll take the chuck back off. Well, I do not know what that was, but wow, we just had something come totally loose. That's what that was. That's a little scary. All right, well, the wheel just came totally loose off the arbor there, and yet not loose off of here. So I guess I'll get the motor plate off the back, and I guess we're going to be rebalancing this wheel regardless. Well, if you get one, you might want to verify everything's tight before you even do your test run up. That was interesting. I don't know, I'm not sure what's loose because this nut is still tight and still tight on the back. Okay, well, now we get the concept. There's our weights back there for balancing this. We've got this other arbor here that we can use to mount that on there and balance it. And the issue was that this just was not put together tight enough. That is what came loose on us. All right, well, we've got our paper pieces in there, so we'll rebalance this. Give us a chance to try that out. We've already run the wheel, but may as well go ahead and do our ring test. Nice ring tone out of there. Nothing flat, dead sounding. So I think our wheel is good, just came loose on us. So we'll rebalance it, put it back on, and we will try again. At least the wiring part worked though. Alright, I think once we get it mounted back on there, we'll make sure we give that a a good extra tighten. So we'll have to play with doing a little balancing. Well, before we balance the wheel and finish out our test run and put this machine into operation, good time to jump in here and talk a little bit about what's been going on. A little bit more than just grinding wheels are coming loose and falling off. I would say that the wheels are pretty much falling off of this whole project of unboxing and setting up this surface grinder. We are now about, let's see, 6 or 7 weeks into this project of recording different things, and it's turned into a whole series of videos, and it all stems from some instructions and how I wired up the motor. So I know I made a comment just, what maybe seems like 15-20 seconds back in this video that, hey, at least it wasn't the wiring problem. Well, it turns out that there was a wiring problem, and the motor ran for that first minute or so when you saw the test run and the wheel came loose. I didn't get it on video, but I came back and I started the motor up. Shortly after that, it ran for about 30 seconds and a ton of smoke came out of it. Didn't work. Since the motor had run, didn't think it was a wiring issue, thought it was a motor issue. They sent me another one. That came in with about a week or so and wired that one up exactly the same, not realizing it was a wiring issue, even after I had looked at the diagram. And turned out that one ran for about 90 seconds as well. So clearly after 2 fails, it's got to be a wiring issue and not going to be 2 dead motors after that. So I've got a third motor coming, and that's where we're going to pick up this video, is once the third motor is installed on here and this is operational, we'll pick up and we will finish out the rest of this video. So now it's turned into a series of videos. I'll put some links in right here and you'll be able to go watch a full video that talks through the wiring issues and exactly what went wrong there and what happened. And I also went back in this video and I plugged in the correct wiring procedure. So if you notice that the motor housing looked a little bit different partway through that wiring, now that'll make sense because it's going to be whatever the newer motor is. I'll demo the wiring on this newest one, and they do come a little different. Like this one had a black box on it, the original one had a green wiring box on it, so there's just some slight variations in what they look like, but that's what happened back in there. And we will continue this video. Then there's going to be another video on how to take a motor off and put a new one in place. So in case you ever need to change a motor on a surface grinder, there's a separate video out there for that as well. We'll see how far we make it in this video. It's a little bit long as I've edited it and cleaned it up. I don't know if we're going to grind in the chuck and do all of that. I may just go ahead and test grind a little piece just to see how it operates and runs. And then I may come back and do another video on grinding the table on this and grinding the bottom of the chuck and flipping it over and grinding the top. I may end up doing a separate video on that as well. We'll see how it all comes together. I just wanted to pause for a moment and get you caught up on everything that's been going on over the last 6 weeks. And if the video seems a little jumpy in a few places, that's what's going on and that's why. But at this point, let's go ahead and balance this wheel and let's get it back on here, and then we'll pick this video up with a new motor, wheel in place, and test run again. Stay tuned. So just going to cover wheel balancing here really quickly. If you're going to own a surface grinder for any amount of time, I would definitely recommend having some kind of a wheel balancer on hand. At some point you're going to need to change a wheel, or in our case, this wheel just came loose on its mount here, and because it came loose, we're going to need to rebalance that. So first thing, this wheel balancer I picked up from Tormach. Originally I was going to buy the Tormach Surface Grinder. It came with some little stepper motors on it for automatic feed. Tormach has discontinued their Surface Grinder series, but they still had some parts and accessories left, so they had a pretty reasonable price on this wheel balancer, so I picked this up from them. Step one is make sure you put it on a surface and level it. So I've got some nice adjusting screws on here, and it's pretty quick to go through. 2 adjustments on the back, get that level, and then you've got another adjustment knob on the front. So I've got that leveled side to side and got it nice and leveled front to back. Now that this is leveled and ready to go, the Grizzly came with this extra arbor that you can use specifically for balancing your wheel. So it just goes through, it mounts into that taper where the wheel mounts. And we get it mounted on the back side. And then it's just a flathead screwdriver that you use to adjust and move these weights around on here to balance it. And it's as simple as you set it in place on here and you see if it's going to stop. Now it had a little bit of movement there, so I wouldn't say that I have it absolutely perfect yet, but I am pretty happy with how I have it balanced at this point. And I can turn it. Let's see, if I put it there, it's going to spin back a little bit. Doesn't quite, it almost wants to stay stopped. So I have little bits of movement on it here if I put it in different places. So again, I don't have it perfect, but I also need to dress this wheel still. I'm sure it's not running perfectly true. It's going to be a little bit out of round. So after I dress it, I plan to pull it back off, and then I will balance it again and maybe spend a little bit more time on it. But if I get it stopped in place, it seems pretty good. Really, it does not take much to get this to move on here. And once you get it moving, it'll definitely stay moving. And you want to see where it's going to settle. And that's it. That's all there is to balancing it. It's just kind of a constant back and forth until you get it exactly where you want it. So I'll spend a little bit more time doing that again after I dress it, but I think for right now, it's ready to run up here next time. So let's get this mounted back on the grinder. We've got our motor back in place on there, and let's go ahead and finish our test run, get this wheel dressed, and get this thing ready to go. Our wheel is all nice and balanced. Left-hand thread, don't forget that part. And that's it. Again, left-hand thread, we've got that snugged up. Get the cover back on the back of that motor again. We'll get our wheel guard the rest of the way in place. And we're going to be ready to plug this in and start it up. Well, there it is. Our motor swap is complete. We've got our new one in place. It's wired, tightened up, wheel guard is on. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous about plugging this in and checking my wiring out this time around, but third time's a charm. Let's go ahead and plug this in and see how it goes. We've got power contact lights over there. So we've got it plugged in. Got white light came on, so that looks good. All right, it's time for contact. Let's see how we did. So far so good. Started, it ran. I am not feeling any heat of any kind. I think last time it was getting a little hot. I hadn't noticed that. All right, startup number 2 is where I've had my problems. All right, I'm not getting any heat whatsoever. If anything, I can feel a little bit of heat from the bearings up here at the front. And I can just feel that the housing's got some temperature. The rest of it feels great. That's 2 times starting up. Well, YouTube, now that we have this machine in place, we finally have it wired up correctly, we have it running. Let's talk through some specs on this and talk a little bit about the fit and finish on this machine and see what we can do to get it up and making some sparks. So the table is supposed to be 6 by 12. If you measure it, it's actually more like 12 3/8 on the length of that table, so you get a little bit extra. On the width, we're looking at about 6 and maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so. And travel wise, you're supposed to get about 13 1/4 inches of travel. And yeah, I think maybe I'm about 3/16, maybe not a full 13 1/4 pin to pin. So that's definitely right on track. And we'll wind this over to see what we get. We're supposed to get 7 1/8 of crossfeed travel. So right now I've got about 1/8 of an inch. That's all the way to the back, but I'll also drop in a picture. So even with this all the way to the back, the wheel is about 3/4 of the way off this leading edge, but the wheel isn't gonna be completely clear on this side. So again, I'll snap a picture and drop that in so you can see where the wheel lines up. But I will say on the end-to-end travel, the wheel is definitely passing the center line, and it is, going beyond that the table. So the table is properly centered up in there. So we've got about 12 3/8 a table. You've got 13 3/16 of travel. So you can definitely get off of both ends of the table that way to the center of the wheel. Coming off of this side, you're not quite going to clear the table. You can definitely grind it. So when we go to grind it in, you'll be able to grind the entire table, but you're not going to come clear on this side. So I will say though, the table feed, this hand wheel, really does feel pretty nice. I know it doesn't have the ball bearings on it like some of the other models, but that is pretty smooth feeling. Excited to see how that's going to grind. And this crossfeed, this runs really smooth. It feels really nice. Feels nice and tight. And obviously it has a gib. We can tighten that up as needed as well. All right, it does come out. We're going to hit a stop. Yeah, I would say we're spot on 7 1/8. We had about 1/8 of an inch. We're at 7 1/4. So we had exactly 7 1/8 of an inch of travel. But you'll notice the wheel is a full, almost 3/4 of an inch off of the backside there. So you've got lots of clearance to come completely off over on that side. On this side, it just doesn't quite come clear. So not sure why they didn't center the table up there a little bit more to have it so that you get clearance on both sides, but you definitely can clear off of that way right there. And then if we get up here on this elevation hand wheel, this one also feels really smooth. Feels nice and tight. Yeah, got a little bit of, obviously, our backlash in there, but you're going to keep going one direction, primarily going down, so that should feel good. And I know this only has 1/1000 of an inch graduations on here. Let me try and zoom in on those. So it only has 1 thou graduations, but they're pretty far apart, so it's going to be pretty easy to stop halfway in between or take just a couple of tenths if you want to come down. So even though they're 1 thou graduations, I don't see it being any issue to take a few tenths, take a smaller than a 1 thou cut. So overall, fit and finish on this, I think feels really good. And I know from a order of operations, ideally what I should be doing is I should grind in this table and grind that flat. And then I should put my magnetic chuck on here upside down, grind the bottom of that flat, and then flip it over, bolt it in place, grind the top of that magnetic chuck, and then I'll be ready to grind something. This video's gone on long enough. I have been 6 weeks trying to put this together with wiring and everything else. So I think we're going to save the grinding the table, grinding the chuck, and all of that for another video. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bolt our magnetic chuck in place right now. We're going to get our diamond dresser on here. We're going to go through dressing this wheel. We'll get that dressed, and then we're going to go ahead and put something on there and just take some cuts. We'll just go ahead and grind something on both sides. We'll measure it. We'll see how accurate this is right out of the box without even touching anything, without grinding it all in. We'll see how that looks. Then we'll call it a wrap for this video, and you can come back for another one where I'm going to grind everything the way we're supposed to and finish the setup on this. But let's go ahead and get that chuck in place, get this wheel dressed, and let's make some sparks. That's what this is all about. Now, I'm not over tightening those too much. It's a magnet holding it in place, so I'm pretty sure I've got those plenty tight that is not going to move before our magnet would slip. So we've got that lined up on there. Definitely looks like it was made for it. All right, let's get our wheel dresser out here. Get this set up to dress that wheel. All right, here's what comes in the kit from Grizzly. So we've got our base, and we've got our diamond that we're going to put in here. It's got a nice shoulder that it goes to lock into that base, so we'll push that all the way in there. Find our Allen wrench to tighten that up. All right, we're locked on. Now what seems odd to me is there is no way to lock this in place even when you're dressing the wheel, but it locks in place pretty well. So I guess that's obviously going to hold it secure. We're just going to put it where we want it. We'll move that up towards the wheel. We'll get that lined up in the spot per the instructions, and we'll get our wheel to the right height. We'll come down and touch off on that and get that wheel all nice and squared off. And I will be wearing a face shield and a respirator as we run this to make sure not getting all that wheel dust, not breathing that in, or all the dust from when we start grinding here. All right, and you can see in our instructions we want to get just off of center. We want to get behind there, and that's our sweet spot where we want to get into. We want not to be directly below the wheel. We want to be on that trailing edge of rotation is where we want to get that dresser set up, and then we'll wind it across. Alright, I think that looks about like the picture where the middle of the wheel is pretty much on this front edge of the dressing tool. So I think that is good. We're going to get this started up and we're going to come down, we'll touch off, and then we'll get our wheel all nice and dressed and running true. I think I'm going to touch, when I first start the wheel, I'm going to touch this outer edge with a red Sharpie. So since it's the first time I am dressing it, I'm guessing the wheel's going to have some out around, and it's fairly clean and white. I'm not going to necessarily see exactly where I've cut off or not. I want to make sure I dress the entire wheel and get rid of that red Sharpie mark. So I'm going to go ahead and touch that with a Sharpie when I fire it up, and let's get it dressed.
Alright, I've taken about 4 thou and I've got maybe a third of the wheel dressed. So we'll come on down and take a little more. Alright, the Sharpie line was a good idea. I've taken about 5 more thou and I still have a chunk of wheel that's not dressed yet. So definitely recommend the Sharpie line, and it's about another 6 thou that I just took. So again, this is a brand new wheel. It came loose, it's never been dressed, so that's why we're having to take a little bit extra off. Let's go ahead and finish this up. Alright, so definitely my Sharpie line has been touched all the way around, just about cleaned off most of the way. Got one little spot where it's not totally cleaned off, but it's definitely hit it. Cut it all the way around, so we are dressed. I'm going to vacuum up all this abrasive that came off of there, and I think we're just about ready to put something on here, and let's give this thing a try for grinding. Alright, so we got all that abrasive cleaned up, we've got that all vacuumed up, and I think we are ready to grind. Ideally, since I just dressed so much off of this wheel, I'm sure I changed the balance of it a little bit by having to take so much off of one side to get that to run true and round since it's a brand new wheel. Ideally, I should be rebalancing this wheel right now, and I will definitely do that before I grind in the table and grind in both sides of this chuck. I'll check that again for balance and make sure that I get it balanced as good as I'm able to get it. But for right now, hey, my patience is about done after looking at this machine for 6 weeks, and I want to go ahead and get a piece of steel on here and see how she grinds, and let's make some sparks. One other thing to note, I had trouble earlier in this video filling this one-shot oiler back here, but I will tell you that when the table is wound all the way forward, you can actually get to the fill cap on that a lot easier. Don't have to use that crazy funnel setup that I had earlier. Just another thing to point out to be able to get that to fill your one-shot oiler a little bit easier. Alright, I've got, normally I'm going to do multiple, or my plan is to do multiple knife blades on here at the same time with this large chuck, but in this last batch of knives I made, I've got 4 of them that are from one bar, and 1 of them from another bar that's about 6 thou difference in thickness. So I'm going to grab that one thin one that's the oddball, and that's what we're going to grind in first. Let's see how flat we can make it, let's see how it measures, and see what kind of finish we can get. Let me go grab that right now. Alright, after my luck with this surface grinder so far, let's go ahead and get that stop properly in place. This is stainless steel, so it is not quite as magnetic as some other steels, but I think we still have plenty to hold there for the little bits that we're going to be grinding at a time to take off. Let's go ahead and see how we're doing. Alright, we are ready to go.
Alright, heat's not too bad. It's getting a little bit warm, but I can still put my hand on it. This is heat treated and tempered, so I do have to be careful that I don't get it too hot. So when I first started, it was definitely a low spot over here, cutting a little harder over here, so I went ahead and backed it off. And it was it's almost 5 thou difference from one side here to the other. So I got those matched up, and I was taking 2 thou cuts right there. So that was 2 thou at a time off of this edge, and I think I've got it just about squared up now. Temperature wise, I think we're cooled off again. So I'm going to go ahead and take a 1 thou cut now, and I should be taking a 1 thou cut across the whole piece. Temperature wise, still staying nice and cool at that 1 thou cut. That worked pretty well. Obviously having a machine with coolant would be an advantage, but I've got one little spot not quite cleaned up there. So I'm going to go ahead and take 1 more thou. We'll see how it cleans up, and then I'll probably flip it over, and we'll go ahead and see what we're ending up with. Alright, I've got just a shadow of a mark. Let me go ahead and take 1 more pass on that to clean that up so that I don't have to come back and do it again after. And I'll slow my feed down a little bit and see if we can't get a little nicer finish on there, although that's looking pretty good. Two thou cuts, it gets a little warm. 1 thou cuts barely even raises the temperature of it at all. So that is nice. And that's a full 1 thou cut, and I'm happy with that finish. It came off of there pretty quick. Let's get her flipped over. I think that would buff up and shine up just very nicely. Hit it on that 600 cork belt, get rid of some of the ripplies, and then hit it on the buffer, and we should have exactly what we're looking for. Now, theoretically, it should be the same height, but we'll touch it easy just to make sure it's holding it flat down there. Alright, just one little high spot right in the center where we hit. And now we should take this ball cut off of here. Yep, still not too hot, we're good.
Well, there it is. You can see how much mess we made back in there with our grinding shavings. Yeah, good little pile of those to vacuum up. But even without coolant,
it stayed relatively cool. We've got both sides of this cleaned up all the way out there to the tip. Let's get a mic on this. We've got a good, decent distance to be able to measure here to see what kind of accuracy we're getting out of this. So let's see what we've got. So I'm about 149 up there, maybe 48 and 9/10. So I'm almost a full thou different. Yeah, 150 up here. So I'm back to 149 right back there. 149 and a half. Almost 150. I've got a high spot. 150. 149. 150. 149. 149. So I've got a little high spot in through here, but when I first flipped it over onto this side, it ground off on that high spot, so I think I need to flip it back over now and touch on the other side. So it looks like maybe a couple of processes I work to get this flat, so I'm not going to attribute all of that to the grinder at this point. And we're pretty much, we're decent down in here. So let me go ahead and flip it over and let's do a couple more passes on this other first side. Let's reflatten that, flip it back over one more time and see if we get that a little closer. Let's figure out what's the actual grinder versus what is me grinding the warpage out of my piece of steel here. Alright, stay tuned. Let's go ahead and knock a little more off of this and see where we come out.
Also, just to check, we've been running this thing for a long time now and we're still doing great. No heat in there. What just happened there? That just took a whole lot of material off on that little cut. I'm not sure what I did. I guess I overturned it. Well, I guess we got a few thou to take off now to clean that up. Alright, I do not know what just happened there. Alright, I think what happened is my piece slid on the chuck and the tip of the knife pushed up there on that stop. That's what made it want to dig in right there. So, alright, let's go ahead and we'll have to take a few more passes and let's grind that mistake out of there.
Alright, while I'm grinding that mistake out, let me share a little bit more of what I figured out. On this side, I do believe I ran up on that fence and that's why it went so deep. I get one of these on the other side as well. Did a little bit of reading, and when you're grinding without coolant, if you slow your feed down too much, you're immediately going to build up heat, and it's pretty easy to get what appears to be these spots you've dug in there, but it's really just the heat buildup on the wheel. The material expands a little bit, the grinding material builds up on the wheel, and that's how you end up with these thou and a half deep little grooves if you slow the feed down. So just make sure you keep that feed moving at a good pace.
Alright, overall it's still pretty cool. I definitely got a little hot spot there. Iron that out. Alright, I think I'm finding that a half thou cut and a little faster feed works better. So let's stick with that and get this thing done. Alright, well, we got our big gouge out of there. Let's flip this over, give it a pass on this other side, and then we'll measure again and see where we're coming out.
You can literally see where I just hesitate ever so slightly on the feed, and that's what caused this to happen here. I can tell you I have ground 4 more knife blades since finishing this video, and if you keep a good steady feed pace and don't hesitate or pause, I haven't had this happen again. So truly just user error is what's causing these dig-in spots. Nothing wrong with the machine, just all in how you run that feed. So good learning. Thankfully this one doesn't take near as long to grind out. All right, let's do some measuring and see how we're doing on this now. So not sure what was happening there when I was grinding. Obviously you saw 2 times where we dug in a little bit. I think the first time it pushed up on the edge a little bit. The second time I think I was just going too slow, and you go too slow and it's almost like it just heats the material up and it just kind of grows up into the wheel. I don't know, it was kind of weird. It wasn't too deep that second time, you know, and I also found that taking half-thou cuts and feeding a little faster seems to work better than trying to feed too slow across there. But let's see how we're doing on our thickness. All right, so we took off another 1/8 thou on doing both sides there. So now we're down to 17. Well, definitely got a little more accuracy. Maybe 1/10 under there. 17. Couple of tenths under there. 17. Okay. Yep, 17. I would say we're within a couple of tenths right there, and that's even after messing around and digging a hole that we had to clean up. So heck, at this rate, I don't even know if I'm going to grind in this chuck and the table and everything else. You know, this is not super horsepower, so trying to grind off 12 inches, I'm not even sure how this machine would handle that very well. So I think I'm going to call it good right there, and I think I'm just going to go with, if I can get within 2/10 on these flats for my mechanism, that is everything that I need out of this surface grinder. I just need to practice a little bit. I'm sure that everything that was going on with digging those holes, that's just me operating this by hand, and you know, I just need to get a little bit more comfortable behind the controls on this and make it work. I'm calling this a wrap. Let's go ahead and close out this video. Well, YouTube, we'll call that a wrap on another video here in the BladesIIB shop, as we have unpacked, set up, and done some test grinding with this Grizzly 5963 surface grinder. Everything I can tell you at this point is this machine is going to do everything that I needed it to do, so it's getting a thumbs up for me. My only complaint I have with this whole machine was with my wiring problem and, you know, the instructions that were in there. But hey, that's a whole different deal. That's got nothing to do with the operation of it, so we'll put that behind us, and we're just going to start making some sparks with this machine and get it to do what we need to. But smooth operation. It runs really well. I know I was looking for one with a ball bearing table, but I'll tell you, this moves just fine, and I'm happy with the surface finish that I'm getting on here. It's the power for what I need it to do. This 3/4 horsepower motor is going to be able to take enough off there. I did find that half-thou cuts, a little higher feed, seem to work better than trying to go with 1/thou cuts. And but again, the accuracy of it, you know, we went through and just have to flip your piece a couple of times. And right now, I think the limiting factor on operating the surface grinder effectively is me. I haven't run a surface grinder in, it's probably been 30 years. The only time I ran a surface grinder was when I was in training as a machinist. Never had one in the shop where I worked. So it's been 30 years since I've run a surface grinder. Hey, I've got some learning and some comfort level to build up, but it is definitely going to deliver on what I need. So if you're looking for a small surface grinder, for me, I am very, very limited on shop space, so this is the only footprint that I could fit in here at all. This one is going to work. It is manual. I'd love it if it had a stepper motor on here and it was a power feed, but the reality is it didn't take me very long. It took me maybe an hour or so to grind up this blade, and that's with learning, getting it set up and everything else. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to put 5-6 blades on that chuck and, you know, within an hour or so grind up all 5 or 6. That's not too bad of a timeline for what I'm doing in my process to make knives. So even though it's manual, hey, it'll give me a break from running some other machines and do something a little bit different. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed seeing this surface grinder come together and go into operation. Hey, if you're new to the channel and you liked this video, I'd appreciate it if you put a like or a comment in there. Also encourage you to go check out some of the other videos on the BladesIIB channel. And if you like what you see, great time to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you are up to date, know when other videos come out. You can ring the bell and be alerted on those as well. Till next time, I hope you're out in your own shop working on some projects of your own. I'm going to be here in the BladesIIB shop. I've got 5 knives I need to finish up, and then I'm going to be working on that next video, which is going to be the Pearson Pro pallet system and making some pallets up to increase production on some of my other knife parts. So until I get that video out, y'all take care.